Yeah, okay. Okay, so now it is 2 o'clock in London or in UK.
2:30 actually.
So, 2:30, yes, that's right. So now we will start today's our gathering. And
Geshe, could you unmute?
oh yeah, we will start once again saying the refuge and Bodhichitta lines, those 4 lines. And as I've been keep saying, repeating almost every time when we come together, and people who have joined with me in Jamia and last, for many years, you may already fed up with me hearing from me repeating this again and again and again. But, I feel it is very important to remind us again and again until, the refuge and the bodhicitta, these 2 mental states, these 2, amazing mental states or minds are really deep rooted within our psychic, within ourselves. We need to repeat that. Sometimes, repeating is a little bit boring, and but it also have a, the positive, what you call the consequences. So I'll once again I'll repeat the importance of the contemplating, reflecting on the the why we are taking refuge. What is the main reason that we need to go for refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha? And that reason should be, come from within ourselves, not somebody told us, not somebody, the impose upon us, not in that manner, but from our own side, through listening, contemplating, and meditation on such as the Buddha's first teaching, the 4 noble truths. The first 2 noble truth of suffering, dukkha, and the noble truth of origins of dukkha. More and detail we reflect on these 2, on teachings that Buddha had given, and subsequent many great Buddhist teachers have, elaborated, explained in more detail. The more and more we reflect on those points to understand these 2 truths that Buddha taught, dukkha and the origins of dukkha, which is within ourselves, and then we will understand from our own heart, from our side, we will understand why we are taking refuge, why we need Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha as our refuge. And the same, the more we understand the last 2, the teachings of the last 2 noble truths of cessation of suffering and origins of suffering, and the noble truth of path that leads to that cessation. And then, we will understand the refuge that the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So that is something, we should explore, we should learn, contemplate as further as possible, as detailed as possible, then to gain, some kind of deep feeling within ourselves, need refuge, and refuge are these three jewels. And that is what these first two lines, Sanje Chodang Soki Chongnamla, Changju Patu Dani Gyapsu Che. And that going for refuge in three jewels. It's not only when we are having difficult times, all the times, all the times, whether we are, everything is going well, successful, or many things are going wrong, difficult, the young or old, regardless of all those differences in the samsaric, drama, from our side, from our heart, sort of, of course we need to sort it out, those surface challenges, but from the deep down our heart, the feeling of the three jewels are my refuge. And that is really something very, very useful. Then we will feel, safe deep down our heart. The life, continues. Day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year, it continues. Things come and go. And same within ourselves, our, the physical possessions, status, relationships, they come and go. But the refuge will stay within ourselves. So that is something very, very useful to do. Then the next two lines, cultivation of altruistic awakened mind, Bodhichitta. All the time, remind ourselves, it is not easy to tackle, to work with our self-centered mind, the egoistic mind. Not easy at all. The reason is that kind of mindset is very much, from our own side, very much, unfortunately, deep-rooted, very much ingrained within our psychic. And then environment, the conditions are not that favorable. Not many good examples are there outside. People are, there are many good people. I'm not saying all are very selfish, self-centered mind, but not that easy for us to see that. And so therefore, under that circumstances, situations, not easy to enhance, to nurture, to nurture the altruistic awakened mind. Nevertheless, day by day, week by week, bit by bit, we should try to chip bit by bit this egoistic, self-centered mind. Though the self-centered mind, when it occurs, when it arises, it occurs like supporting us, protecting us, helping us. That is how it occurs. That is how it arises, when it arises within ourselves, like our supporter. But in reality, particularly in the long term, it is not. And this is repeated by these great teachers and again and again and again. So this last two lines, Dagi Jinso Jibe, Chonamji, Dola Pager, Sanjay Tobar Show, my activities, giving charity, practicing ethics, all these activities, virtuous activities, wholesome activities to become, the causes and conditions, to benefit that all living creatures. Dola pencher, doa, the last line. Doa, literally it means migrator, doa, living beings, sentient beings. In Tibetan, there's, I think it may come from Sanskrit, origin. There are many different terms. I think it's the same in other languages too. But in Tibetan, to express the living beings, there are many different, the terms, and this is one. Dola, doa, penchil, in order to benefit. Sanje dubar sho, to attain enlightenment or to experience the full enlightenment. To attaining full enlightenment is for the sake of living beings. That is what here, this last line. So therefore, try all our best to hold these two minds, refuge and bodhicitta, not only this gathering, but also during the day, in the morning, in the evening, before going to bed. If we go to bed, as His Holiness Dalai Lama says very often, if we go to bed with the bodhicitta, with that kind of mind, then sleep 3 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours, that sound sleep has this, the strong influence, strong, the taste of bodhicitta, and that will be really, if we manage to go to sleep in that manner, there are many different, the practices are explained during, before going to bed, before sleeping, to have this vivid dream, and in the dream to have all. There are also these practices, but if we go to bed and go to sleep with the bodhicitta, then when the last day comes, the last day of this life comes, there's a great chance to move to the next life with the bodhicitta. That will be amazing. That will be amazing to do. So therefore, we will start the gathering, saying those 4 lines 3 times together for that purpose. Okay, I'm not seeing the writing. I don't know. Yeah, okay. Sanje chedan soje chonam chanjo pado dane jaso che dage chenso jibe sonamanje dola penje sanje do para sanje chedan soje chonam chanjo pado dane jaso dage chenso jibe sonamanje dola penje sanje do para sanje cheda soji chonamala chanjo pado dane japso che dage chenso jibe sonamanje dola penje sanje do para. as we did our last gathering last week, we will do the same here today, saying the Chenrezig mantra or Mani Padme Hum instead of doing silent meditation. And as the King of Prayer, at the beginning of the King of Prayer, before engaging in 7 limb practice, such as prostration and so on, so on. We had, I had explained based on these nice commentaries to visualize, to imagine, the entire space is filled with the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, not in a form of statue or painting, but as a real beings, with all the qualities that that we have seen when we are reading this King of Prayer. Some of those qualities of the Buddhas, for fearlessness, 10 powers, and so forth. If that is difficult to remember, to Buddhas as a fully awakened beings, fully awakened in the sense great compassion and wisdoms are fully enhanced, fully developed, and the same all those bodhisattvas. So holding that kind of the visualization or imagination, then we will say the the 6-syllable Chenrezig mantra. As I mentioned the other day, the main meaning of these 6 syllables. I mean, there are many detailed explanations, but the essence is the holding the jewel. Here, the jewel refers to great compassion, holding the great compassion. That means, the sending strong, deep sense of compassion towards all living creatures. Start from ourselves, then expand to all living creatures. Our loved ones who are with us and our loved ones who passed away, recently or some time ago, but then slowly extend to all living creatures. And thinking, all living beings have received that deep sense of compassion. That means free from suffering and origins of suffering. And that is that strong, sense of compassion be extended towards all living creatures. And well, of course, we are in individual our own places, but we will say the, this mantra. Om Mani Oh, yeah. Thank you. Oh, yeah. Once again, I would like to start our class reading few lines from the Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life, or here the Way of the Bodhisattvas. So today's reading is from chapter 3, verse 30, half from verse 30 and 31 and 32. These lines that I'm going to read. This is directly connected, related with the cultivation of bodhicitta. How the cultivation of bodhicitta, the benefits to ourselves. how important it is. So that, of course, cultivation of bodhicitta, as many of you know, there are two sort of aspects that we need to nurture. The first aspect of the mind, of aspect of the mind is strong yearning to work for the sake of living beings. That yearning, should be nurtured. Should be nurtured through, some of those amazing techniques taught by those great masters, including Shantideva. His, favorite choice of the technique is equalizing and exchanging oneself with others. In other words, enhancing that kind of mental states through that, then cultivating love, compassion, and then eventually the altruistic awakened mind. The other aspect of the mind in the bodhicitta, have this to experience the full enlightenment. In this beautiful Maitriya's text, ornament of clear realization, very nicely put it. In these two lines, the Maitreya put it very nicely. What is bodhicitta? Semgye pane, sem mind, semgye here refers to bodhicitta. Bodhicitta. Semgye pane. What is bodhicitta? Semgye pane. Shendun chil. That is the first aspect of the, the mind of the bodhicitta. Shenji tun. Literally, it means purpose of others, or the welfare, well-beings of others. Shendun chil. For that purpose, then the yangda dzogbe, changjuk de, yangda dzogbe, that means, completely accomplished. In other words, full enlightenment. Changjuk, enlightenment, de, and that is the yearning, longing. So in the bodhicitta, when we say, I'm trying to cultivate bodhicitta, I'm trying to nurture bodhicitta, I'm holding bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, in that bodhicitta must have these two aspects. Strong aspect of, what you call working for the sake of all living beings, and with that aspect, for that, then working to experience the full enlightenment. And that is important. Just having, the yearning to experience full enlightenment, just having that mind, if we try to do that without the half of the half aspect of the mind, then it won't count as a bodhicitta. It won't count. But also just having the first half, that aspect, strong yearning to benefit living beings, if we don't have the second half, then again it will not count as a bodhicitta. So it must have the both aspect of the mind, and that will count. So that kind of mind, when we have that kind of mind, and then this chapter 3, the verse, half of the verse 30, I will read that. It is the tree that gives relief to those who wander warily the pathways of existence. In Tibetan, Silam Kamchi Dubai Doeng So Jungshin. When it says the pathways of existence, that in Tibetan, Silam Kamba, Siba, that refers to, here put it, existence in the sense, this existence of in this circle of birth, aging, sickness, and death, and birth, aging, sickness, of death. So when it says that verily the pathways to existence, it referring to samsara. While we are in the samsara, many of us, don't see or don't feel, the seriousness of being in samsara. We feel, something terrible. Only those surface, very gross, the challenges or the difficulties in the samsara. We many of us, we don't see the seriousness of being in samsara. And this is what here, traveler, those people who travel in the deserts and with the strong sun and the heat, and there's nothing in an arid place. Suddenly seeing a shade, a beautiful a tree, have an amazing shade, then go under that shade and see. And that is here, these first two lines. It is like that to ourselves, to the living beings. Having a bodhicitta, cultivated bodhicitta, have that kind of, just create that kind of image. That being in samsara is in a wandering or get lost in a desert, and suddenly find a beautiful, tree which gives huge shade to, relieve the heat and so forth. And that's what here, first two lines, the last two lines from verse 30. Then the next verse 31. It is the universal bridge that saves all wandering beings from the states of loss. The rising moon of the enlightened mind that soothes the sorrows born of the afflictions. That very nicely put it, and very nicely, very, the what you call the metaphors are very clear and very vivid, when we read that verse. Very vivid, very clear. Don't need that much explanation or interpretation. Yeah. Here the rising moon of the enlightened mind. Sun and moons are very often, illustrated or used as a metaphor. Sun's quite often, moons quite often, represents in the Buddhist teaching. I think it's same in Hindu, in other ancient Indian spiritual traditions, like soothing, like compassion. Quite often, moon is represented as a compassion. Then the next verse, verse 32. It is the mighty sun that utterly dispels the misery, ignorance, the misty ignorance of wandering beings. The creamy butter, rich and full, that's churned from milk of holy teachings. So, this verse 32, the last two lines, the creamy butter, rich and full, that gives saying the, those cultivation of bodhicitta, is the essence of the teachings of the Buddha, and particularly here, the Bodhisattva and the teachings, Bodhisattva and the teachings. The teachings that Buddha had given in this, under this, what called the Bodhisattva, the essence of all these teachings Buddha had given is to cultivate bodhicitta, so we should try to really to hold this mind. One of my teachers quite often says, even if it is very what you call the short moment, very short period of time, but still it is worth it to hold that mind. Even it is not very, what you call the strong, if it is very weak, but still it is worth to hold that mind. So that is really something we should try. Yeah. Okay. So now we are going back to King of Prayer. So today we have few questions, and so before the questions, we will read some verses from the King of Prayer. And last time we finished verse 44, heading Manjushri. Last week our reading were very, very powerful readings. In all the verses are extremely powerful to reflect on, to remind ourselves. And particularly, the last week readings that talking about, the many different vast, the qualities of the bodhisattvas. Like an analogy is given, or the metaphor is used, oceans, saying that I shall purify the oceans of realms, liberate oceans of sentient beings, understand oceans of dharma, realize oceans of wisdom, and continue like that. And also, the verse 38 saying, may I purify the power of karma, destroy the power of harmful emotion, that is, affliction, render the negativity utterly powerless. So these are something very, very, not just in a form of prayer, but also for us to really, not in all together in once, but bit by bit, we should try to live with that. So that is, So now the verse 45. Verse 45. Today's reading start from. I think so. Verse 45. And the outline is concluding aspiration. So if you remember, the main, there are three main outlines. The preparation, that is all those verses, the explaining the seven limb practice. Then start the main body of the text. That means the Bodhisattva Samantabhadra's aspirations. Now the last, what you call the outline, that is the concluding aspiration. Now first I will read the what you call the in Tibetan. Jobatane Tseung Manjurji, Yundenamja Tsesung Mebersho, Joba Tseme Bala Neneja, Teda Tubatamje Sawarki. Okay, so that is verse 45. So, So now here, in this verse, in English, saying, led by Bodhisattvas acts by beyond measures. In other words, those Bodhisattvas activities, traditionally, classically listed under the six perfections. But we saw, those previous verses, some of those bodhisattvas, the aspirations are just unbelievable, cannot be, we may think, oh, that is impossible. But that is the bodhisattvas' deeds, bodhisattvas' actions. And these actions don't have any kind of limits or any kind of saying from here to there, or this kind of numbers, or this kind of bodhisattvas activities. There's no limits. There's nothing can measure, nothing can measure the bodhisattvas activities. Joba tseme pala, nene, joba tane tseme mangyurji, yuendenam de tsesung mabasho. Same the bodhisattvas, those qualities, the qualities of the ethics, the qualities of the patience, the qualities of the joyous effort. Some of you do the Guru Puja, Lama Chopa Guru Puja. In that half after the practicing the seven practice, then when we start the Lamrim, the meditation section, and if you read the verse where the Pendulum Sanchujiten, this who wrote the Lama Chopa, where explains the verse which explains the joyous effort. Semjeri Richiya Narmebe, Mena Gaba Jazu Nekuya, Ninjimiji, Chanju Chosunbe, Zundu Parchin over Chingilo. Semjeri Richiya Narmebe, saying, for the sake of each and every living being, if I need to remain in a hell realms, not just once, not just short moments, but for eons, hundreds of eons, if I need to stay in the hell realms for the sake of each and every living beings, my compassion towards the living beings will not diminish, not weaken, because of hardship. Instead of that, to strongly to hold the bodhicitta, may I perfect the perfection of joyous effort. So like that, these bodhisattvas, when we talk about keeping to this immeasurable activities, let my enlightened qualities be, measureless true. So it is not just my sort of activities, the bodhisattvas activities have no measure, no limit, but same the qualities of the bodhisattvas, such as the ethics, tolerance, generosity, and so forth, have also no limits. Nothing can measure, and that's what here this. Second, keeping to this immeasurable activities. So having bodhisattvas all in these qualities, in immeasurable qualities, in limitless qualities, having this, but also same time say, may I accomplish all the miracles, powers of enlightenment. So this one, the commentator nicely put it like this. Sanje chanju samba tamje gi zurula sobe namba chuba tamje chawa de sheba toba gyuji. Both bodhisattvas have these good qualities, amazing, but still thinking, imagining, holding the aspiration to have those other Buddhas and bodhisattvas, all those qualities, this miracles, power of miracles in life is referring to skills to work for the sake of living, to benefit to living beings. Skill is, having good skills is very important. Even if somebody has a very good heart, but if he or she lacks the skill, then it is difficult to reach that good heart, activities of the good heart to the others. So therefore, the skill is something very important part of that. Now then the next verse, extent of the aspiration. So I'll read this in first in Tibetan. Namge tadu yuba chizamba. Semje malu tanya teshinde. Chizam ledang nimung tar yuba. Dage malam tanya tezam. Sentient beings are as limitless. So this is, the previous have the connection to the previous verse 45. Why the bodhisattvas deeds, bodhisattvas acts are limitless, because sentient beings that the bodhisattvas want to serve is limitless. Therefore, the activities or the deeds of the bodhisattvas are limitless, cannot measure, because the number of sentient beings cannot measure. We can't say this is the number. Beyond that, there's no living beings. So that is what here, sentient beings are as limitless. And then saying next line, as the boundless, expanse of space. So the Tibetan and English, a little bit, anyway, it's quite often it's like that. Boundless expanse of space. Here talking about the space in the sense, even the modern those scientists, I think they may talk about space. There's no measure, although talk about one particular Big Bang and so on and so forth. But in general, space. Anyway, I don't know all those things. You guys know much better than me. But that is this third line, which is important one. It says in English, the English is in the fourth line. Be as limitless as their karma and harmful actions. So in Tibetan, so living beings, limitless living beings. In the case, in the sense, we cannot put numbers. We cannot put numbers. Number of sentient beings is this. We cannot put any numbers, and that is the meaning of limitless. So these living limitless sentient beings, they also have created virtues as well as non-virtuous actions with the afflictions. So therefore, bodhisattvas' deeds and actions and their, what you call the mental strength, dedication, there's no limits, because the living beings that they want to serve, there's no limits. in terms of the living being themselves, and in terms of their actions of the living beings, particularly actions that are led by the afflictive emotions or affliction. There's no limits. If we reflect on our own one day, 24 hours activities that we do. I mean, there are many good activities, but also, there are many unwholesome activities. Not necessarily unwholesome as a very dramatic, but lack of mindfulness, lack of conscientiousness, a lack of good observations, and so on and so forth. Due to the past, what you call our habit, we create lots of unwholesome deeds, and that's what here it is saying. And the third line in Tibetan, the fourth line, which is in English, so shall our prayer, my prayers of aspiration for them, and that is the verse 46 and 45. These two have a connection. Okay, so we will leave it here. Today's our reading. We are going to do a question and answer session, and oh yeah. Okay, who's going to read the first question? It is Nella. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Geshe.
Okay. How's Brazil?
Do I need to answer that, Geshe?
Okay.
We have a complete example of what lack of compassion can do.
Okay. So what is your question?
Would it be possible to comment on the last line of verse 33 in relation to the mind's capacity to reflect like a mirror? The line says, through the power of liberation, where all is realized as like an illusion.
Mm-hmm. So it is referring to the when so when our minds are purified, the purified, such as self-grasping, such as the true grasping, such as when our minds are purified, these afflictions, these distortions, then what we see, liberation from these distortions, our minds are able to see that all the things and events are performing as they are, but same time, what we see, these are how the performance, their functions, their the changes, whatever, all these activities are like what you call the don't have any kind of intrinsic or inherent entity. Even though seed produce nice beautiful flower, even though eating delicious cake gives you pleasure and joy and so on and so forth, these all are performing, but They don't have any kind of intrinsic or inherent entity. When our minds are purified, when our minds are liberated from this self-grasping. At the moment, while the self-grasping, grasping of true existence is within our mental state, what we see, the delicious cake makes us joy, and so on and so forth. We perceive them as something happening, something outside from our mental projection, something very concrete, solid. That is what here mainly referring to, like an illusion. Like as I mentioned in that time, when we look at in a clear mirror, our face, a reflection of our face in the mirror, it is like almost, like exactly same what we have. But in the mirror, that reflection is not real, our face. It is pure reflection. And that's what here is saying, as like an illusion. As like illusion, they all appears have some kind of, intrinsic, inherent, true nature. But when our minds are purified, these two graspings, we will not have that kind of belief. There are some solid, concrete, intrinsic. That is what the meaning. Okay. Yeah. Now, then the next.
Paul.
Oh yeah, Paul. Yeah, Paul Weston.
Hi, Geshe. My question is, how do we incorporate the King of Prayers into our daily practice?
Okay. Now, you are asking big question. Yeah. I can read the verses, and I can comment on the verses. But when you ask how can I do this practically, then it is not easy. Yeah. The question is very important question, and yes, that I think we can do this in several different layers, according to our background, according to our, the conditions or the facilities, and also the strength of our mind. These are really important to work according to our mental strength. We can't, I think it's the same in English. In Tibetan, we have this expression, without knowing what are the, in the alphabet, Tibetan alphabet, what are the, what you call, individual constant, not constant. Anyway, without knowing individual letter, you can't sort of make the sentence. And that is what here. So therefore, sometimes it is very useful, one day just choose one verse or one line to reflect on that and see how much you can do according, how much you can live your life according to that verse, meaning of that verse, but not push too hard. Pushing, which oneself is not ready, oneself is not, not in that kind of strength. Don't push too hard, but same time to have the confidence, to have the strength. This is which I mentioned earlier. This, when it comes to practical level, then it is very slow, and it should be, bit by bit by bit. But in the mental level in the sense when we are saying prayer, when we are cultivating aspiration, to have strong aspiration, have a powerful prayer saying in the words or the reading, But when it comes to practical level, then we have to be very careful not to jump that we are not ready. But bit by bit can be done. Bit by bit can be done. So that is my suggestion.
Thank you.
I will tell you. I will tell you one nice story. And many of you people who come to my classes in London, you have heard this story, but it is a nice story, and I want to tell you this. What's time? Okay, we have time. And so the story is this. Just outside Lhasa is the capital city of Tibet. Outside Lhasa, there is a what you call the guy who's relatively materially well off and so forth. So one time he went to Lhasa and he listened a teaching, and the teacher was giving teaching on Milareva's life story and how Milareva eventually become very, very, highly realized, not only highly realized, but become very popular, very well known, and so forth. And this guy, he thought, okay, that is the trick. I should follow the Milareva's footstep. So all his possession, what he got, he just, give it to the people, and then he run, up to the mountain, and hoping he will become Milarepa, like Milarepa. But of course, nobody knows this guy is up in the mountain, so nobody comes up to give offerings. Nobody knows he is up in the mountain. So he waited. Nobody comes up. Nobody brings offering. Nobody knows he is up there. So after a few months, then he thought, okay, now I made a big mistake. And then he went down to the town, and then he shouted, this man called Milareva make me destitute. So that is the story here. This Bodhisattva practices should be done very bit by bit by bit. Okay? Oh yeah. So now we have, okay, yeah.
So,
One. Yeah.
Next question is
Okay.
from Katia.
Yeah.
She's here, but she's asked me to do it for her.
Okay, do it.
Okay then. So she said, I'm reading the King of Prayers every evening for my brother Ivan, who passed away committing suicide on the 15th of December. He was for many years trying to live with a strong depression and the side effects of his medication, which was psychotic episodes. As he has taken his life, I wonder, and I'm very worried about how he will reincarnate. I guess psychotic episodes were due to the pharmaceutical drugs he was taking for some years, so I think his brain or the chemicals in his brain were damaged. As he will have a new brain, will he be healthy at that level? But he took his life using nitrogen, so will he have respiratory problems, breathing problems? Are just his karmic imprints what he is taking with him as a part of his mental continuum? Or is it maybe that with all the suffering he has passed through, like depression and unhappiness, he has finished paying for the past bad actions and he won't suffer the same way? How is he going to reincarnate? When? After the 49 days of Bardo? And how is he now during these 49 days of Bardo transition? Can he hear or see us or know in a way how we are? Does he know how we feel? Can healing happen to him during these 49 days? Thank you.
Okay. So there are few things that I would like to say in relation to this sad situation. some of these questions, particularly some of those last part, which you said, how is he going to reincarnate when after 49 days Pado, and how is he now doing? These are that we all have these questions. It is not just you, because when we lost our loved ones, these questions, I myself remember that, having these questions that you raise. And these are the very, the understandable questions that we would like to have answers. But in reality, there's no clear answers to these questions. Although there are teachings, like when somebody passed away, his or her next rebirth will take place within 49 days. But these are general, what you call the explanation, not very that precise, as far as I know, not in that very precise. And also there are these teachings saying, until his or her next life is found, that person who passed away may, wander around close to that his or her the previous or the just life he or she passed away, left. Again, these are very general, interpretation, explanation, not very precise, not very that. So the questions that you asked, this later part of your question, these are the sense of, the part of the grief, part of the sadness, part of the losing loved ones that we would like to know. For example, a mother or parents, their teenage boy or girl went to the city, went to the town, the parents want constant text message to say where he or she is. It's almost same. That's our, but in reality, we will not have any, we would like to, for example, when I lost my mom, when I lost my, the dad and my brother, yeah, I had these similar questions. Particularly when I lost my brother, who was younger than me, and seeing, his children and his wife, and not that easy at all. And constantly, there's very similar questions, but there's no clear answer. So therefore, when these questions come into your head, it will stay a little bit longer, but same time, not to dwell too much on those questions. If we dwell too long on these questions, it will be very, very exhausting, but there's no positive response to these questions. That's I'm talking about from my own experience. So that's the one part which I think I would say. And as I said, there's no clear answer to this. People may say, I remember quite early time when I was in London, there was in Jamyang, when we were in Princebury Park, there was a lady who lost her husband or son, I can't remember clearly now. Of course, that was very, very traumatic and so forth. And then she searched so many, these questions come up again and again to her. Then eventually she found this, what you call the fortune teller, or those people who talk about giving message. I'm not saying these people are telling lie. I'm not saying that. But these are not very helpful. You know, it may give you a little bit comfort, but then the next grasping is, what is the next? What is the next? But there's no that very clear. So therefore, not dwell too much on these questions, but these questions are part of, you know, losing our loved ones. That because of that, understandable. Now then, the first part of your question is related to you know, your brothers when he was here and how he ended up losing his life, and your concern was, you know, what kind of consequences or what kind of, you know, karmic results there might be, you know, in his next life. So these, you know, karmic consequences or karmic results are not just one karma, one action produce one result, like a 2 + 2 is 4. It is not like that. They all come into many different factors to play. I'm sure your brother, you know, although you said in your questions, he suffered a lot with the mental depression and so forth. But I don't think entire his, although I don't know, I don't think entire his life, since, you know, childhood until he passed away, I don't think he's in that kind of situation. Yes, you know, he suffered a lot with the mental illness, but during, you know, I'm sure there might be many occasions that he has done good things too. So that it is not just, you know, the 1 + 1 is 2 in karmic, you know, process, and producing result is very, very complicated. Very, very many different elements will play the role. So again, you know, because you said, for example, you said he took this particular, you know, the drug to end his life, and that drug really caused to, you know, the what you call the breathing problem. These are not really, you know, not that kind of connection. So the best thing what you can do, you know, as you have been doing, say prayers, like a king of prayer, and if there are things from your position, if there are things that you can do some, you know, practical things to the others, and particularly people or organization have this connection with the depression. There are many in the West. There are many good organizations, charitable organizations, who support mental illness. You know, involve, engage with them to whatever you can. You know, thinking your brothers, you know, and on behalf of your brother. I think those are something very practical, useful that you can do. So you know, it just you know, you lost your brother just recently, and these kind of sadness, confusions, questions will come. Sadly, that is our human emotional situation. But there will also in English, it is also in Tibetan, there's this nice expression, time is healer. So gradually, when time passes, slowly, of course you will not forget your brother, but the sadness will slowly reduce. Yeah. So do the prayer that you are doing it. And if you can, engage in some practical things, helping individual people, organization who have this, like a depression. I mean, I'm sure in India they may have, I don't know, but in the Tibetan community there are very, very few. But in the West, you have this many charitable organizations helping many different kinds of mental illness or the sad, situation. And those are something I found a very, very good culture, amazingly good culture, amazingly good sort of, the things, because if public or individual, wants to engage in a bigger sort of, picture to do something big things. So there are these, what you call the structures. So that is something useful you can do. Okay, so now time is already, So, so this is our last session in this, just I think 4 weeks. So, and then now we are going to take a few weeks off, and I think I'm coming back in March, starting 7th of March, and we'll have another 4 or 5. I think that Peter and Tree will send you 5 Sundays. Hopefully, we'll finish the King of Prayer in those 5 Sundays, because we have done the main body of the King of Prayer. So that's what we are going to do. And then when we finish the King of Prayer in the next round, then I have another nice 2-3 nice prayers that I would like to read, because at this stage I don't feel I want to talk to you or I want to discuss with you deep philosophical points. So that is okay. So we will do the 21 Tara prayer as a dedication. Om Jesu Ma Pama Joma La Cha Ze Lo Chanze Joma Nyuma Pa Mo Chene Geje Lo Ta Ta Ma Chikden Sumgwe Chuji She Je Kesa Je Wa Ne Joma Chanze Tongge Ta Wa Gun Do Kangwa Jene Zibe She Kama Tongda Tsoba Nama Rabdo Chewe Raparam Chanze Seme Chune Je Peme Chane Nabara Jem Chimba Tsundu Kadu Shewa Soba Samde Junye Chanze Dejin Shebe To Taya Nabara Jawa Jema Malu Paru Jimba Tope Jawe Seji Chindu Dem Chanze Dodara Hong Ye Dedan Chodan Namka Kam Jigden Dongbo Shabji Nende Loba Meba Guba Nem Chanze Dajin Mela Tsamba Longla Naso Wanju Che Chombo Rana Tisa Namanda Nujin Soji Dune Chanze Deje Chadan Peji Paro Chogo Rabdo Chom Yegon Yenjan Shabji Nende Mabara Choba Shindo Param Chanze Duri Jiva Chenbo Tuji Pao Nambara Chom Chuji Shene Tony Denze Tao Tamje Malu Sam Chanze Gunjo Sumze Chaji Seme Toga Nambara Jem Malu Choji Kolo Jembe Rangi Veji Sonamatu, Chanze Rabdo Kawaji, Ujin Veji Tenwa Bam, Shiba Rapshi Tudara, Dudan Jigden Wandu Zem, Chanze Sashi Jongwe So, Tamje Guba Numani, Tony Yewa Yige Hong, Pongba Tamje Nambara Drum, Chanze Tawe Dumbo, Yamba Tamje Shindo Bara, Rebe Trene Obame, Tabara Shindo Verote, Chanze Keve Tama Meta, Parve Chingwe Vene, Yejan Yungum Gune Koroke, Jaye Pune Nambara Jom, Chanze Saji Wala Chaki, Tegi Nujin Shabje Dom, Chonye Jenze Yige Hong, Rimba Dumbo Namni Gem, Chanze Dema Gema Shem, Yangen Dejin Junyem, Soa Omda Yanda Dembe, Dikwa Chenbo Jomba Nyem, Chanze Gune Korva Kawe, Daye Lune Nambara Kem, Ige Jube Ngani Kwe, Dikwa Hongle Joma Nyem, Chanze Dure Shamni Dabe, Honge Nambe Sabe Nyem, Ramenda Radan Beje, Jigden Sumna Yewa Nyem, Chanze Lai Tsoi Nabe, Rita Tajin Chana Nam, Tara Niju Peji Yege, Duna Malu Bane Sem, Chanze Lai Sonam Jebo, Tada Miam Jiten, Kune Goja Gawa Jeje, Zeda Melama Nyemba Sem, Chanze Nima Dawa Jebe, Jinye Bola Uro Sem, Hara Niju Dudara, Shindo Chabe Rimne Sem, Chanze Tini Sumnam Gebe, Shive Tuda Yanda Dem, Dudan Rola Nijun So, Jomba Ture Racho Nim, Zawe Ngadi Tuba Deda, Chanze Wane Nisho Zaje. Dedication. Gyawa de gyo sanama yeshe chozo she sanama yeshe le chong tamba kunye to para chanjo semjo rembo che ma je panama che juro che che ba nyamba me ba ya kone kondu pewa sho kare rave korve shingamade pendant dewa malu jongene Chere sewa tenzin jazo shabe sede bado tenjuro je. Oh yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And yeah, I listen.
Thank you, Geshe.
Thank you, Geshe.
Thank you, Geshe.
Thank you, Geshe.
Thank you
Very
very
much.
much.
Thank you, Priya Peter.
Thank you,
Later.
Geshe-la.
Thank you, Geshe.